Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today I'd like to just go over macroclimates and microclimates within what effectively is almost a sealed room. And the noise that's going on is part of what generates the macro and the microclimates. Just quickly, for those who haven't seen it before, there's a few little computer fans. They run 24/7. One lives up near there, comes across the top of the roof. One lives a bit lower down and moves air across this section. And then there are two hidey ones that live down here. That one pushes air across this section here. And then there's one right down in underneath there, which effectively keeps my Miltoniopsis cool and moving air, very important. So in addition to those little fans that run 24/7, we've got the big circulating fan up there. I can stop that by pulling the plug out, and on a dull day that's exactly what I would do, because I don't need two big fans running on a dull day. However, it's sunny and bright today, so it stays on. There's another big circulating fan here. Strangely enough, the big one produces a gentler flow of air than the slightly smaller one. It's just the way it works. There's the big extractor fan up there that sucks the hot air out from near the roof when it goes over a certain temperature, and that air is replaced by this little fan down here, which is an inlet fan, soon to be replaced by the same size one as up the top there, because this one just isn't pulling in enough cool air. I'd like it to be a bit more buoyant in here with a little less heat. So I've got the fan, I just haven't installed it. So that keeps the air moving. Moving air for orchids, one of the most important things. It'll stop your leaves burning, it stops stale air, it stops cold spots, it stops hot spots. And do you know what it stops more than anything? Fungus, bacterial rots, and all those nasties that we really don't like. Moving air just helps combat that. It just stops it settling. And if you add into that fresh air, because you're pulling it in from outside and circulating it, that's just like 100 times better. Fresh air is good for your orchids, they love it. Okay, so macroclimates first. Up near the roof it's warmest. Even when the air is stirred up with the fans, it's still warmer up near the roof. The sun comes through that polycarbonate and generates heat, and it's at the top. It's at the roof point. So warmest place up the top. Coolest place is over here, down here on this shelf. Why is it coolest here? Both of the foggers are up this side, and they generally get their air pushed across here. Plus it's got two little circulating PC fans, and it is slightly shaded. So living in there, Masdevallias, Restrepias, and the like. Okay, and right down the bottom there are my Paphiopedilums. Now strictly speaking they should be a bit warmer, but if I bring them up much further than they are now, they'll get too warm, and also the light starts increasing dramatically. So macroclimates, up near the roof, warmest place, and on this side of the grow room it's also the brightest place because the shade netting doesn't go right across. So this is where the Vandas and the little Neophonecias live. They get the brightest light I can give them without taking the bubble wrap down, which I'm not prepared to do. A macroclimate that's warm and bright, but still having buoyant moving air, just the job for the Vandas. And for the first year I'm actually flowering Vandas. Some little spikes coming on there, so it seems to be working. And I don't know whether the camera can pick it up from down here, but the Neo's got flower buds on as well. So that extra light is working. Okay, what else have we got as far as macroclimates are concerned? This grow room faces southwest, so any plant that's looking in the direction we're looking now is facing the sun during the daytime, or most of the daytime. So it's a macroclimate. All the plants that live on that side of the hanging rail are facing the brightest light. You can only see the back of them from here, but my Tolumnias live up there. They face the light. The rest of my Tolumnias live up here. They face the light. So macroclimate. My Dendrobium nobiles live up high. Maximum light I can give them. My Cattleyas live up high. Maximum light I can give them. Okay, nice macroclimates. A fair few of my Dendrobiums are up high as well, with a couple of exceptions, but looking through there, there's anosmum, there's primulinum, various things that like the bright light, so that's where they are. Now indirectly, there's a little semi-climate, because all those hanging plants and pots, especially that beast up there, this prima donna, that generates a slightly shady place. So even though this shelf is bright, it's not as bright as up in the roof. So down here, while in flower, I actually get away with Phalaenopsis because they do have some shade. Officially, it's a bit bright for them. But for the short period that they're there, which is basically because they're in flower, they do okay because they have shade from other plants. Plus the air's moving, so it keeps their leaves cool. Because Phalaenopsis don't half soak up the heat with those big fat flat leaves. Okay, so over here on this top shelf it's slightly brighter. There's slightly less plants actually shading this top shelf here. So again, there's my Psychopsis are up here, Cymbidiums, there's that lovely little Miltonia there, it's still hanging on there. Also my Ceramis projects up on this shelf is mainly Oncidium types, a couple of other oddities in there, but it's mainly the Oncidiums. And then we go down one shelf, and we go down one level, and the plants above, because of their pots and their trays and their leaves, they provide a little bit of shade to the next shelf down from the roof. Now obviously later in the day the sun's going to lower itself on this southwest side and it will come in from the side. So later in the day when the sun's not as strong, these shelves are quite bright as well, but not for the whole day like on the top shelves. So down here we can keep things like, oh that's just opened, hey! That's my Prosthetia green hornet. That's a lovely flower. Absolutely love that. I hadn't noticed that. Yay! Nice little things. So on this shelf we can keep things like some Oncidiums. There's a very large Dendrobium cross at the back there that doesn't need as much bright light because of what it's crossed with. Few Oncidiums, few Brassia types. So the next layer down, shall we say. And coming over here, looking through there, right in the corner there's a Coelogene, that's Fimbriata, and then there's my little Miltonias. Now when the sun comes round over the roof in the morning, that shelf there, right up next to the glass, gets very bright light, albeit through shading. So they are in quite bright light, but not for long, because as the sun moves round, it's just gone in now, that's helpful. As it moves round, obviously they're shaded by this sea of pots above. So that's like a little mini climate down there. It's also slightly cooler because it's lower down. If we go down yet again to another shelf, we can get away with having a Zygopetalum. No sun for that beastie. And unfortunately my huge Maxillara tenuifolia has to live in there. You can probably just see the flowers. It's got 6, 7 blooms on it now. It's so big I can't get it up in the brighter light where it really ought to be. Nonetheless, it's flowered. It's done okay. And coming round this side, I've got all my Phalaenopsis on that shelf that are not in flower. There's a Shari baby there as well. Tatty looking object. And then down here again another macroclimate. This is the shadiest part down here. This is where the Masdevallias and the Restrepias live. They have constant air movement and they're next to the foggers, so the humidity will always be that little bit higher, and they do okay. And then right down on the ground floor, as I said before, are my Paphiopedilums, some of which aren't doing too bad, some of which are not doing so good, but they live there. This is a special microclimate. It's on the floor. It's as low as I can get. It's the coolest place in the greenhouse. It's also got one of the little computer fans constantly on that just provides air movement. Miltoniopsis do not do well in still air. They like the air to be buoyant, fresh. It's difficult to find suitable words. Buoyant and fresh, and if at all possible, relatively cool. They're not cool growers in the true sense, but they're also not intermediate. They're on the fence in between the two, which makes them a trifle awkward. But if you start with strong plants and give them the right care, they'll grow well and they produce those flowers. What more could you want? So just a little bit of extra attention to where you keep them. They don't like bright light. Unlike Miltonias, that actually can be treated like Oncidiums, that actually like quite bright light without the direct sun. Again, they like the moving air though. But these don't need the bright light. They can live in similar conditions to my Masdevallias and things like Phalaenopsis. So yeah, Miltoniopsis live down there. And in amongst them are a couple of little Deces, but there's only two and they haven't flowered yet. Again, another microclimate down at floor level, but this is a special shelf, this one. This is not only down at floor level, but it's right directly in line with the inlet fan. That is the coolest place in the grow room. And this shouldn't be here. I didn't tidy up after watering. Excuse me a minute. I'm supposed to be up there on the roof. Right, where were we? So down here I've got my Berryoda. Again, that's a Kingianum cross. They're cool, relatively cool growing plants. And I've also got my two old-fashioned Odontoglossums, one of which has got a nice spike coming. Yay! I'm really looking forward to that when that flowers. There's also a couple of Coelogenes. There's actually a Brassia up the back there as well, and it's only down here being kept a little bit cool because it hasn't long been repotted. And before I start pushing the energy up into that plant via the few roots it's got, I'd like it to settle into its pot. So it's staying cool at the moment. So there we go, macro and microclimates. They're very important. Again, over this side, that's my Roseoglossum. Again, that's not really intermediate, it's a cool grower. And it's on the fence, it's in between cool and intermediate. So by placing it here on this side of the grow room, that cold air comes in from below it and starts to get stirred up. So this little bit here stays cool, cooler. I won't say it's cool by any means. So that's what I mean by macro and microclimates. Yeah, macroclimates are your levels of where your heat are and your light. You've got brightest light near the roof, or it is for me, and then medium light as you get a little bit lower down, and then semi-shade below those plants. The plants above provide the shade for the plants below. The plants that have got nothing above them are in the brightest light. Another little macro and microclimate. All these ones here on that grid there, all my Tolumnias along there, they face the sun. But if we come round the back, these do not face the sun. So things like these Dendrobiums, Senile and Trigonopus, I'll get there in a minute, they don't like the really bright light that some of the others do, but they still like it quite bright. So they have their back to the sun. I've got a Coelogene up there, likes its back to the sun, if it ever grows. And my Prosthetia Garciana, that doesn't like the brightest of lights, but it likes it quite bright. So it doesn't face the sun, it faces away from it. And then basically the fans come and go with the temperature changes. The air stays buoyant, it stays relatively humid because of the humidifiers. And it all works quite well on a day like this when the sun comes and goes. On a brilliantly sunny day, the foggers have to work really hard. They're on permanently. because the extractor fan's pulling out the moist air and replacing it with less moist air, so they get triggered and they just stay on, fighting to keep some humidity level at a reasonable level. So that's what I mean by macro and micro climates within your grow space. You've even got them on a windowsill if you think about it. If you've got things hanging near the glass, they've got the brightest light, and if they're higher up than the windowsill, it's probably a bit warmer up there as well. And then, you know, you might have some shelves just inside the windowsill, so the ones at the back of the shelf are farther away from the light, so they don't get as much of it. So you've got macro and micro climates even on a single windowsill, and you just need to adjust your plants either by eye and by experience, or just by what you can read or glean from the internet. Some orchids like really bright light. Some orchids like so much bright light they need to be outdoors, or they won't get it. You know, you just have to adjust your plants. And there's a microclimate within a macro. In amongst those plants there are my Phalaenopsis type dendrobiums. Now they don't like bright light, so even though they're on the top shelf, they're directly under the hanging pots. So they're actually shaded, but because they're on this top shelf, they're a bit warmer than they would be if I moved them down a shelf. And that's just right for them. They don't like bright light, and they like to stay warm. But again, what they don't like is still stale air. That's an orchid killer. You'll get bugs, you'll get funguses, you'll get rots, you get all sorts of things if you've got stagnant, stale, still air. Orchids live in a place where it's a buoyant atmosphere, the air moves, and it's fresh and it's clean. And it's difficult to actually achieve that in a house. You just have to do what you can. So that's all I was getting at here, is everywhere you look in a place where you've got quite a few plants, there are little mini climates within the bigger climates. For instance, these two here. That's my Aerangis Alicei and my Laelia anceps. Boy, that new growth's coming on. Yay! Hopefully that's going to flower. It's a flowering size division, which doesn't mean it's a flowering size plant, but it should be. Now, they're in a little microclimate because they're at a level where they actually get very good air movement because they're directly in front of the big fan. They also get quite a lot of bright light simply because there's very little above them. So although they're not up in the roof, the light level is not that different to being up in the roof, but the temperature is. It's a damn sight cooler down here in line with one of the main circulating fans than say it would be right up in the roof, up that end of the shelf, where the air movement's far, far less. And there's plants over here dancing in the wind, you know, that's so to speak. So that's all I was getting at, is wherever you grow your orchids, think about your plant, individual plant. What does it need? Does it need the brightest light possible? It needs to be close to your glass without singeing the arse off of it. But some plants don't need so much bright light, but then they might need it really warm. You know, so you've got to think about your temperature, you've got to think about your light level, and that's before you even start thinking about watering and feeding. But this is just where to keep them rather than how to look after them. And everywhere you start getting a lot of plants relatively squashed in together, you will have little microclimates, almost at one plant level. Then if we get on to watering, again, those are macro and microclimates. I have lots of Tolumnias, and they're all mounted, every single one of them. I don't want any of these in pots. I don't like that sort of plant in a pot. That's me. But then some of these are quite young plants. You know, they're coming on. But this one, although it's got 3 lovely fans on it, it hasn't yet established a good root system from when I got it. They're just starting to push out round the back. So these are older roots, they're not as efficient. So there's quite a lot of moss on that pad. When I water that one, it gets a splash, because I don't want that moss to be absolutely soaking wet. Now, as we all know with sphagnum moss, when it dries, when it goes crispy and crunchy and it's dry, it actually takes a little bit of effort to get it really wet again, and I take advantage of that. This one I don't want to get really wet again, I just want to get it damp. So when I pour the water over one like that, it'll just get one splash, and that'll do it. It's enough moisture for the less efficient roots to take into the plant, and eventually it will start pushing out those lovely new white ones with the green tips. So that's like a microclimate at plant level as far as watering is concerned. Then if you take this one, this is an even younger little plant, but it's got less moss, so it's got less to stay wet. It's also pushed out a shed load of new roots recently. That one gets absolutely drowned. That gets water poured over it 4 or 5 times until I'm certain that moss is as wet as it can get. Another little microclimate at plant level. The more moss you've got, the deeper it is, the longer it will stay wet. Now if your plant needs to stay moist all the time, brilliant. If it needs to dry out, that ain't such a good idea. So even at plant level, you've got a little microclimate. So what else did I want to talk about? That's probably about it for this one. It's just looking at where you grow your plants, thinking about their needs. If you're not sure what their needs are, either ask somebody. There's a wealth of knowledgeable people on YouTube. Just put in a comment. You'll always get an answer from those sort of people. It's just the way they are. Same with me. But just think about what your plant's needs are. Google it. Find out where it comes from. Does it live high in the mountain? Does it live, say, in a deciduous forest? If it does, then obviously when the leaves fall off in the winter, it's going to get pretty bright light. Whereas in the summer, it's under leaf cover, so it won't. However, in those sort of forests, you often find that during the summer, it's chucking it down, and boy do they get wet. Constant wet rains virtually every day, and not just a little shower, it chucks it down. They get absolutely wet through. So that's their growing season. And then, you know, come leaf fall, the light obviously increases. It doesn't in all deciduous forests. Some are in places where those deciduous forests get an awful lot of fog and mist. So even though the leaves are gone, it might not be quite as bright as some people think. And certainly in some of the older books, they still think that's really bright light, full sun. Well, in a cloudy forest with mist everywhere, there ain't no sun. So they're still not that bright. So you need to know about your plants. Google it. Find out as much as you can. And then when you found out, you know, you can adjust your plant. If it doesn't really want such bright light, tuck it behind another one. Give it a little bit of shade from your window or whatever. Just try and get your plants in the best place you can. It still won't be perfect. It's not a jungle. It's not a cloud forest. You know, you can't really compete with that. So you know, just get as close as you can. Do the best you can for each individual plant. Don't just line them up in a row. Think about the type of plant and how it's supposed to be, and just try and get as close as you can. It's the best we can do. Okay, that's all for this one. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for listening to my waffle. But it is quite important to try and get your plants in the best place you can for each individual plant. Don't treat them as a collective. Don't think that they all are the same, because they're not. You know, even a bunch of Phalaenopsis orchids, you might have a couple of species in there. A lot of them will be hybrids. Some of them have got fat, thick leaves. Some of them have got thinner leaves. That tells you a little bit about where they come from. But unfortunately in the orchid world, once you get into the world of hybrids, unless it's a primary hybrid where you can directly look up its parentage and try and take an average of the two, there'll always be one stronger parent than the other. But you know, once you get into the hybrids, you just have to generalize, I'm afraid. It's the best we can do. But certainly where the species are concerned, find out where it comes from. Find out how high up the mountain it grows. And if it grows in jungly type, you know, permanently evergreen, steamy type jungles, well, does it grow up the top of the tree? Does it grow around the back of the branch? Does it face the sun? Does it grow near the base of the trunk? You know, all these things have an effect. They're all little climates. And your plants will do much better for you, dare I say, as best they can, if you can get them close to their natural environments. Okay, thanks for dropping by. Bye for now.